3 bulls heard the rancher was bringing another bull onto the ranch. First bull: I've been here 5 years. I'm not giving this new bull any of my 100 cows. Second bull: I've been here 3 years and have earned my right to 50 cows. I'm keeping all my cows. Third bull: I've only been here a year, and so far, you guys have only let me have 10 cows. I may not be as big as you fellows, but I'm keeping all 10 of my cows. Just then, an 18-wheeler pulls up in the pasture carrying the biggest bull they've ever seen. At 4,700 pounds, each step he takes strains the steel ramp. First bull: I think I can spare a few cows for our new friend. Second bull: I actually have too many cows to take care of. I can spare a few. I'm certainly not looking for an argument. They look over at the third bull and find him pawing the dirt, shaking his horns and snorting. First bull: Son, don't be foolish. Let him have some of your cows and live to tell about it. Third bull: Nah, he can have all my cows. I'm just making sure he knows I'm a bull. A woman with a passion for gardening was growing increasingly frustrated. No matter what she did, her tomatoes just wouldn't turn red. One afternoon, while walking past her neighbor's garden, she couldn't help but admire the vibrant, perfectly red tomatoes hanging from the plants. Curiosity got the better of her, and she stopped to ask, "Your tomatoes are amazing. How do you get them to turn so red?" The neighbor chuckled and said, "It's simple. Twice a day, I stand in front of my tomato plants and expose myself. The tomatoes get so embarrassed they turn red." The woman laughed but decided she had nothing to lose. For the next 2 weeks, she tried the unconventional method, faithfully exposing herself to her tomato plants morning and evening. One day, the neighbor stopped by, grinning. "Well," he asked, "did my trick work? Are your tomatoes red yet?" The woman sighed and shook her head. "Not quite, but my cucumbers are absolutely enormous." A crowded United Airlines flight was canceled. A single agent was rebooking a long line of inconvenienced travelers. Suddenly, an angry passenger pushed his way to the desk. He slapped his ticket on the counter and said, "I have to be on this flight, and it has to be first class." The agent replied, "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be happy to try to help you, but I've got to help these folks first, and then I'm sure we'll be able to work something out." The passenger was unimpressed. He asked loudly, so that the passengers behind him could hear, "Do you have any idea who I am?" Without hesitating, the agent smiled and grabbed her public address microphone. "May I have your attention, please?" she began, her voice heard clearly throughout the terminal. "We have a passenger here at Gate 14 who does not know who he is. If anyone can help him with his identity, please come to Gate 14. With the folks behind him in line laughing hysterically, the man glared at the United Airlines agent, gritted his teeth, and said, "F*** you." Without flinching, she smiled and said, "I'm sorry, sir. You'll have to get in line for that, too." A Marine, an Army grunt, and an airman are having a beer, and the Army grunt is telling this story about how one time he found a scorpion in his tent. Marine asks, "What'd you do?" And the grunt says he crushed it with his boot and flung it out the flap. The Marine laughs and says, "What a sissy." The grunt asks, "Well, what would you do then?" Marine replies, "When a scorpion gets in my tent, I usually cut off its tail while it's still alive, keep it as a pet for a few days, might prank my senior officer with it, then eventually I cook it and eat it." The grunt feels a little embarrassed, then shifts focus to the airman and asks, "What would you do?" The airman says, "I'd call the front desk and ask them why there's a tent in my room." A woman asks her husband at breakfast time, "Would you like some bacon and eggs, a slice of toast, and maybe some grapefruit juice and coffee?" He declines. "Thanks for asking, but I'm not hungry right now. It's this Viagra," he says. "It's really taken the edge off my appetite." At lunchtime, she asked him if he would like something. "How about a bowl of soup, homemade muffins, or a cheese sandwich?" He declines. "The Viagra," he says, has really spoiled my need for food. Come dinner time, she asks if he wants anything to eat. Would you like a juicy ribeye steak and some scrumptious apple pie? Or maybe a rotisserie chicken or tasty stir-fry? He declines again. No, he says. It's got to be the Viagra. I'm still not hungry. Well, she says, would you mind getting off me? I'm bloody starving. Bob's wife, Sally, called their insurance agent to file a claim and demand the amount the barn was insured for, $60,000. Hold on just a second there, that's not the way it works. First, we'll send out an adjuster to assess the damage, then we'll provide you with a replacement barn just like the original, stated the agent. After a lengthy pause, Sally replied, What? Well, if that's the way it works, cancel the life insurance on my husband immediately. 4 guys have been going on the same fishing trip for many years. A few days before the group's annual departure date, Bob's wife puts her foot down and tells him he isn't going. Bob's fishing buddies are very upset that he can't go, but what can they do? 2 days later, the 3 get to the camping site to find Bob sitting there with his tent set up, firewood gathered, a large trout cooking on the fire, and drinking a cold beer. Heck, Bob, how long you been here, and how did you talk your missus into letting you come? Well, I've been here since last night. Yesterday evening, I was sitting in my recliner when my wife came up behind me, put her hands over my eyes, and asked, Guess who? I pulled her hands off, and there she was, wearing a nightie. She took my hand and pulled me into the bedroom, where she'd lit candles and put rose petals all over the place. He chuckles. She's been reading 50 Shades of Grey. On the bed, she had handcuffs and ropes. She told me to tie her up and cuff her to the bed, so I did. And then she said, Do whatever you want. So, lads, here I am. A small tourist hotel was all abuzz about an afternoon wedding where the groom was 95 and the bride was 23. The groom looked pretty feeble, and the feeling was that the wedding night might kill him because his bride was a healthy, vivacious young woman. But lo and behold, the next morning, the bride came down the main staircase slowly, step by step, hanging onto the banister for dear life. She finally managed to get to the counter of the little shop in the hotel. The clerk looked really concerned. Whatever happened to you, honey? You look like you've been wrestling an alligator. The bride groaned, hung onto the counter, and managed to speak. Oh, God! He told me he'd been saving up for 75 years, and I thought he meant his money. 2 drunks enter a hotel late at night. They approach the night clerk, and one of them says, Could you please give us a bed with 2 rooms? You mean a room with 2 beds? Asks the clerk. Whatever you say. So they get a key and somehow to stumble upstairs to their room. After fumbling for 10 minutes, they even manage to get their door open. As they stumble inside, the door closes behind them, and they are in total darkness. They go forward slowly, and both fall on the bed closest to the door. Ah, says one, now we can get some sleep at last. As they try to rearrange themselves, they suddenly realize that they are not alone in their bed. Hey, there's somebody in my bed, says one of them. There's somebody in my bed too, says the other. Let's get rid of them. We paid for this room and we're going to sleep in the beds, says the first. They start a tremendous struggle. They heave and push until eventually one of them throws the other on the floor. All right, he shouts. I've thrown mine off the bed. You are lucky, says the other. I got thrown off and I'm too tired to fight anymore. Well, never mind, says the first. Why don't you just come and share my bed? Let's get some sleep round here. Before setting off on a business trip to Tulsa, I called the hotel where I'd be staying to see if they had a gym. The hotel receptionist's sigh had a tinge of exasperation in it when she answered. We have over 300 guests at this facility, she said. Does this gym have a last name? Daryl and Harold were the best patients in a mental institution. The place had an unusual annual contest, picking 2 of the best patients and giving them 2 questions. If they got them correct, they were deemed cured and free to go. Daryl was called into the doctor's office first and asked if he understood that he'd be free if he answered the questions correctly. Daryl said yes, and the doctor proceeded. Daryl, what would happen if I poked out one of your eyes? Daryl said, I'd be half blind. That's correct. What if I poked out both eyes? I'd be completely blind. The doctor stood up, shook Daryl's hand, and told him he was free to go. On Daryl's way out, as the doctor filled out the paperwork, Daryl mentioned the exam to Harold, who was seated in the waiting room. He told him what questions were going to be asked and gave him the answers. So Harold went into the doctor's office when he was called. The doctor went through the formalities and then asked, What would happen if I cut off one of your ears? Remembering what Daryl had told him, he answered, I'd be half blind. The doctor looked a little puzzled but went on. What if I cut off the other ear? I'd be completely blind, Harold answered. Harold, can you explain how you'd be blind? My hat would fall down over my eyes. 2 men are in a lunatic asylum, and one night, they decide they don't like living in an asylum anymore. They decide they're going to escape. They get up onto the roof, and there, just across this narrow gap, they see the rooftops of the town, stretching away in the moonlight to freedom. The first man jumps right across with no problem. But his friend didn't dare make the leap, afraid of falling. So then, the first man has an idea. He says, Hey, I have my flashlight with me. I'll shine it across the gap between the buildings. You can walk along the beam and join me. The second man immediately spots the problem with this and shakes his head. What do you think I am? Crazy? You'd turn it off when I was halfway across. During a visit to the mental asylum, a visitor asked the director what the criterion was that defined whether or not a patient should be institutionalized. Well, said the director, we fill up a bathtub, then we offer a teaspoon, a teacup, and a bucket to the patient and ask him or her to empty the bathtub. Oh, I understand, said the visitor. A normal person would use the bucket because it's bigger than the spoon or the teacup. No, said the director. A normal person would pull the plug. Do you want a room with or without a view? A wife finds a note from her husband on the fridge one morning. My dear wife, you will surely understand that I have certain needs that you, being 57 years old, can no longer satisfy. I am very happy with you, and I value you as a good wife. Therefore, after reading this letter, I hope that you will not wrongfully interpret the fact that I will be spending the evening with my 19-year-old secretary at the Comfort Inn Hotel. Please don't be upset. I shall be home before midnight. When the man came home late that night, he found the following note on the dining table. My dear husband, I received your letter, and thank you for your honesty about me being 57 years old. I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that you are also 57 years old. As you know, I am a maths teacher at our local college. I would like to inform you that while you read this, I will be at the Hotel Fiesta with Michael, one of my students, who is also the assistant tennis coach. He is young, virile, and like your secretary, is 19 years old. As a successful businessman who has an excellent knowledge of maths, you will understand that we are in the same situation, although with one small difference. 19 goes into 57 more times than 57 goes into 19. Therefore, I will not be home until sometime tomorrow. A blonde decides she's tired of people assuming she's not smart, so she vows to prove everyone wrong by getting a prestigious job. After some soul-searching, she decides to become a rocket scientist. She walks into NASA and says, Hi, I'd like to apply for a job as a rocket scientist. The receptionist, a bit surprised, tries to be polite. Do you have a background in aerospace engineering? She smiles confidently. Nope, but I watched Apollo 13 3 times, and I built a baking soda volcano in 8th grade. The receptionist, trying to suppress a laugh, says, Well, maybe you'd like to take our basic aptitude test? Bring it on, the blonde says, pulling out a sparkly pen. She sits down for the test. An hour later, the examiner comes out looking confused. Miss, you answered every question with C. She beams. Exactly, because C stands for correct. They gently tell her she didn't pass the test, and she storms out, furious. Determined not to give up, she decides to prove her intelligence in another way. She opens up her own blonde detective agency. Her slogan? We find stuff, eventually. Her first client walks in, saying his wife's cat has gone missing. The blonde detective nods seriously, puts on sunglasses, and says, "This is clearly a case of feline evasion." She sets out, questioning squirrels, interviewing mailmen, and even interrogating a goldfish she's convinced is hiding something. 2 weeks later, she comes back with a hamster and says, "Your cat has changed. He's been through a lot." The man says, "That's not my cat." She blinks. "But it's someone's pet. Case closed." Eventually, word spreads, and despite never solving a single case, her business becomes wildly successful because every time she fails, she offers a free glitter pen and a motivational quote like, "Even the moon has craters." And to this day, the blonde rocket scientist turned detective is a millionaire with her own reality show. CSY, kind of trying. A blonde woman was driving about 2 hours outside of San Diego when she noticed a man waving her down on the side of the road. His truck had broken down, and as she pulled over, he approached her car. "Are you heading to San Diego?" he asked. "Sure am," she replied. "Do you need a ride?" "Not for me," the man said. "I'll be here fixing my truck for a while. But I have 2 chimpanzees in the back, and they need to get to the San Diego Zoo. They're already stressed, and I don't want them stuck on the road all day. Would you mind taking them for me? I'll even give you $200 for the trouble." "Of course," the blonde said cheerfully. The man helped secure the 2 chimpanzees in her back seat, made sure they were comfortable, and sent them on their way. Several hours later, as he finally made it into San Diego, the truck driver was stunned by what he saw. There was the blonde walking down the street, holding hands with the 2 chimps, while a crowd gathered around, laughing and snapping pictures. Slamming on his brakes, he jumped out of his truck and ran up to her. "What on earth are you doing?" he exclaimed. "I gave you $200 to take them to the zoo." "I did take them to the zoo," she said with a smile. "But we had some money left over, so now we're headed to SeaWorld." A woman's husband had been drifting in and out of a coma for months, but she never left his side. Every single day, she sat by him, holding his hand and hoping for his recovery. One day, he finally opened his eyes, looked around, and motioned for her to come closer. She leaned in, her heart racing with relief and joy. His voice was weak, but he managed to whisper, tears glistening in his eyes, "You know something? You've been with me through every tough moment in my life." She smiled warmly as he continued, "When I lost my job, you were there for me. When my business went under, you stood by my side. When I got SHOT, you were right there in the hospital. When we lost the house, you stayed with me. And when my health started to fail, you never left." Her heart swelled with emotion as she whispered back, "Oh, darling, that's so sweet. What are you trying to say?" He took a deep breath, looked her in the eye, and said, "I think you're cursed." A man is talking to his best friend about married life. "You know," he says, "I really trust my wife, and I think she has always been faithful to me. But there's always that doubt." His friend says, "Yeah, I know what you mean." A couple of weeks later, the man has to go out of town on business. Before he goes, he gets together with his friend. "While I'm away, could you do me a favor? Could you watch my house and see if there is anything fishy going on? I mean, I trust my wife, but there's always that doubt." The friend agrees to help out, and the man leaves town. 2 weeks later, he comes back and meets his friend. "So did anything happen?" "I have some bad news for you," says the friend. "The day after you left, I saw a strange car pull up in front of your house. The horn honked and your wife ran out and got into the car and they drove away. Later, after dark, the car came back. I saw your wife and a strange man get out. They went into the house and I saw a light go on, so I ran over and looked in the window. Your wife was kissing the man. Then he took off his shirt. Then she took off her blouse. Then they turned off the light." "Then what happened?" says the man. "I don't know. It was too dark to see." Damn, you see what I mean? There's always that doubt. A heavyset guy sees an ad that reads, "Lose weight, only $10 a pound." Call 202-555-0238 and decides to make the call. The operator asks, "How much weight do you want to lose?" "5 pounds, he replies. "We'll have a representative over in the morning," says the operator. About 9 a.m., there's a knock on the door. There stands a fairly good-looking girl, scantily clad, with a sign around her neck reading, "If you catch me, you can have me." The hefty fellow chases her upstairs, downstairs, and all around the house. Finally, panting and wheezing, he catches her, and he has her. After that, he runs to the bathroom and weighs himself. He's lost 5 pounds. That night, he calls the number again and says, "I want to lose 10 pounds. We'll send someone over." The next morning, he's greeted by a gorgeous girl dressed only in track shoes and wearing a sign around her neck that reads, "If you catch me, you can have me." The chase takes a good while longer this time, but later he finds he's lost 10 pounds. That night he calls and says, "I want to lose 20 pounds. 20 pounds? The operator asks. "That's an awful lot." The man replies, "Listen, just take care of it." About 7 a.m., the man hears a knock and opens the door. Outside stands an enormous gorilla with a sign around its neck that reads, "If I catch you, I can have you."